61. The poet Tito made preparations for his long journey. He packed his belongings into a woven, oval-shaped pouch that he could carry on his back by slipping his hand through. Meticulously, Tito organized his things. He took out an ancient Yesile root map stone tablet, a family heirloom, and placed it into his travel bag. This was the most important reference for his journey. With it, Tito could avoid dangerous areas while not losing his way. He would follow in the footsteps of his ancestors, embarking on a journey of return once more. He also packed a precious sword bestowed by the queen, forged from the shed shell of a rue beast. He had even prepared himself for the possibility of battling the people of the abyss if he encountered them. Done. Tito let out a long sigh of relief. Despite being very nervous earlier, he felt completely relaxed at this moment before his departure. It's time to set off. A shadow appeared at the door of the room, and the light dimmed slightly. Tito stopped what he was doing. Without turning around, he knew who had come. Father. His father called out his name sternly. Tito, it's not too late to change your mind. Tito replied, I have never been one to regret. But his father said, when you fall into the abyss, when you face death, when you lose everything, you will realize how ridiculous your words are right now. And once you set foot on the path to seek the God-given land, these are things you will inevitably encounter. Stop now. You have already surpassed me and your grandfather. What more could you want? Tito put down the woven basket he was holding and paused for a moment. It seemed as if he was hesitating and wavering, and his father believed this to be the case. His father's tone softened as he advised Tito. The Yesile route has long been completely abandoned. That antique map stone tablet of yours is no longer usable. Now, the seas are filled with the people of the abyss. Those monsters block the path to the God-given land. Not to mention, God once cast down a curse. We can never return to the God-given land. You cannot cross these chasms and reach the temple of God. After hearing this, Tito did not stop. Instead, he slowly slung the woven backpack onto his shoulders. His movements were slow but steady, just like his current resolve. It is precisely because of the danger and the fact that ordinary people cannot do it that makes it great. Some are born as kings, some are born as God's priests, and some are born with extraordinary wisdom. As for me, I was born to write the greatest chapter in this world. This is my mission and my destiny. Father, you will die. Tito, I am prepared for that possibility. Shouldn't someone dedicate themselves to a great cause? His father pointed at Tito, furious beyond control. You are too arrogant. Do you think you are greater than King Yesile? King Yesile died on the path to seek and return to the God-given land. What makes you think you can accomplish what even King Yesile could not? Tito looked his father in the eye and shook his head. No, it's the people of Yinsai who have forgotten too easily. It's the descendants of King Redlichia who have long lost their faith. We have long forgotten our past and our ancestors. I'm not trying to do something greater than King Yesile. I just want to find our lost past and origins, our beginnings and birth. And then, engrave it for posterity. Tito walked past his father and stepped out onto the street. Many people in the city already knew that Tito was about to embark on a journey to seek the God-given land. They gathered on both sides of the street to see him off. They crowded around, watching Tito leave his residence. The people cheered in unison, rushing towards Tito. Lord Tito, are you really going to search for the God-given land? I heard that the messenger of God gave you guidance and opened the door to the realm of God. Is that true, Lord Tito? Lord Tito. Tito passed through the crowd, and everyone was filled with excitement, constantly approaching him with questions. Tito did not speak, he only looked at them with a smile. He finally arrived at the city gate of the God-servant city, with thousands of people gathered behind him. Lord Tito, you must return safely. Tito waved his hand and left along the steep mountain path of the sacred mountain. Tito set out from the God-servant city, planning to pass through the cities and towns of the Star Luo kingdom before embarking on the Yesile route at the seaside God-descended city. Wherever he went, he caused a great commotion. Everyone had heard of his name and knew his story. Quite a few had even heard that he was going to seek the God-given land. Some mocked his audacity, while others admired his courage to challenge such a great goal. God-descended city. This gradually declining city was no longer the royal capital. Aside from its symbolic significance, it had lost everything, just like the once existent Yinsai kingdom. At a banquet, the lord of the God-descended city asked Tito. I know your story. I heard you are about to embark on an even greater journey. Tito nodded. I am preparing to seek the God-given land. Everyone present burst into laughter. No one believed Tito could accomplish this, they all thought he was going to his death. They looked at Tito with pity and mockery in their eyes, as if he were a frog at the bottom of a well, unaware of the vastness of the world. Faced with all this, Tito remained unmoved. His gaze swept over the crowd, and he spoke in a loud, resonant voice. As forgetting the past and our ancestors something to be proud of. We were once the masters of land and sea, the lineage of God's firstborn. Now, we have lost the ocean and are left with only land. In the end, we have even forgotten our past glory and memories. Tito slowly ascended to the high table of the banquet and called out. This time, I am going to seek and reclaim everything we have lost. I will forever engrave our glory, our faith, our origins on stone tablets and in our memories. I want all future generations to remember that we came from the God-given land, that we were once the glorious firstborn of God. With these words, the entire hall fell silent. The Lord of the God-descended city stood up and bowed to Tito. Blessings to you, great poet. May the power of Yinsai always protect you, and may you have a smooth journey. Tito arrived at the place where Polo and Star had once lived in seclusion, gazing out at the sea. As night fell and the stars descended, the divine cup in his woven backpack suddenly radiated light. In the darkness, he vaguely saw a beam of light rushing towards the distance, guiding him in the direction to proceed. Lord Polo, messenger of God. As the temple of God at the other end of the light. He leapt into the sea but felt no discomfort. In the past, they were a part of the life in the ocean. As he traveled further and further, he looked back at the shore in the darkness. The light from the lighthouse stone of the God-descended city merged with the stars in the sky, shining brilliantly. 62. Yesil route. Tito burst out of the sea like a merman, grasping an ancestral fish. The journey had been going smoothly. He had already left the coastal waters controlled by the Trilobite men and entered the midway point of the Yesil route. This area was now part of the Abyss Kingdom, the realm of the monsters that crawled out from the deep-sea trenches. Although he encountered many troubles and difficulties along the way, even running into patrolling prawn knights at the borders of the Abyss Kingdom, Tito managed to overcome these obstacles and dangers with his thorough preparations and quick wit. Tito was a person skilled at making plans, which greatly aided his journey. An island. While holding the fish, Tito suddenly noticed an island appearing in the distance. He took out the stone map tablet and cross-referenced it to find the island's location. This was once the site of an abandoned Trilobite man settlement, and many years ago, this island had been a gathering place for the Trilobite men. His interest was immediately piqued. As a poet writing an epic, he looked upon these ancient civilization ruins like a starving man gazing at a sumptuous feast. As he approached the island, he noticed something unusual. The island was filled with stone stakes, with unknown objects tied to them. Upon swimming closer, Tito couldn't help but gasp. Corpses were tied to the stakes, and one glance was enough to recognize them as Trilobite men. Not good. He turned to leave, but ripples had already appeared in the water behind him. The poet immediately abandoned the idea of turning back and rushed straight to the shore. He knew what was coming. Drawing his sword, he stood on the island, ready for battle. At this moment, going into the water would only lead to certain death. Instead, maneuvering on the island gave him a chance of survival. His courage and strategy were excellent, but he was not a person skilled in killing and fighting. Yet, he was facing the bloodthirsty people of the Abyss who constantly engaged in slaughter. One by one, the people of the Abyss emerged from the water, their long and powerful tails swaying, stirring up waves that made them resemble small boats crashing against the island's edge. They didn't directly charge at the poet but raced along the shore. When a few of them had distracted the poet's attention, another group coordinated and threw a capture net, ensnaring Tito and rendering his efforts futile. It's over. Having heard of the brutal acts of these monsters, these two words immediately surfaced in Tito's mind. The soldiers of the Abyss Kingdom rummaged through his backpack. They surrounded Tito without speaking, but the long tentacles on their heads collided with each other. Tito knew they were communicating in their unique way. Tito thought they might be discussing how to kill him. Or even how to eat him. Why would a Yinsai person run here? Probably lost his way. A precious sword forged from the shell of a Ru beast. His identity is not simple. These people of the Abyss didn't kill Tito but instead took him away. Tito was brought into the deep sea. Amidst a group of reefs and ancient cups and ferns, he saw an underwater city that resembled a nest more than a city. He also saw the master of this underwater city. The sunlight refracted and illuminated this place. Inside a building constructed from giant stones, a monster lay on a stone seat, gazing at him with curious eyes. Tito suddenly realized that these monsters were not quite what he had imagined. Their eyes were almost the same as those of the trilobite men. Perhaps, when they regained their wisdom, they were no longer monsters. Then what were they? Surely they couldn't be the same as us, people. I am the lord of the Sal domain of the Abyss Kingdom. Yinsai person who dares to invade my territory, state your identity and purpose. The voice penetrated directly through the ears, resounding in the consciousness. Tito immediately knew this was a person of the Abyss who possessed the power of wisdom. After so many generations, quite a few descendants of those sinful kings who received the bloodline of power from King Eli had awakened the power of wisdom on their own. Tito didn't speak, but the other party could directly read his thoughts from his consciousness. Your name is Tito, a poet, and possessing the royal bloodline of the Yinsai people. The Lord of the Monsters picked up Tito's backpack, his gaze falling on the few bone tablets. He didn't notice the faint glow emitted by the decaying cup hidden at the very bottom. Did you write this? Tito immediately panicked, afraid that the other party would take the divine cup. He struggled to move forward, bubbles escaping his mouth. Faintly, one could hear him saying, "Give it back to me." The moment he spoke, Tito panicked. He realized he had made a fatal mistake. He thought of the power of wisdom. The other party might read the existence of the divine cup from the thoughts surfacing in his mind. He immediately tried to suppress all thoughts about the divine cup, even emptying his mind to think of nothing, even though it was already too late. But strangely, the other party made no move. Instead, they focused all their attention on the poem he had written. The other party didn't read a single bit of information about the divine cup from his consciousness, as if some force was preventing anyone from knowing of its existence. Tito tried to communicate with the other party in his mind, drawing their attention to the poem he had written. I am a poet, preparing to seek the legendary God-given land. I am planning to write a great myth about King Redlichia. This is not just a myth about the Yinsai people, it also includes the ancestors and origins of your people. The Lord of the Abyss Kingdom looked at Tito as if trying to determine if he was joking. No one has seen the God-given land. It's just a myth. The Lord appreciated Tito's poetry and admired his literary talent. At the same time, he hoped that Tito, who possessed royal blood, would join them instead of seeking the God-given land. Stay here, I can spare your life and even make you a subject of the Abyss Kingdom. In the future, you can write chapters and record texts for us here. Tito stayed in the Sal domain of the Abyss Kingdom for nearly a month. Every day, he would carve murals in the palace for the Lord. Sometimes, he would also write poems praising the Abyss Kingdom, recording them on pillars or buildings. The Lord was busy every day and didn't constantly monitor or observe what he was thinking of writing. On this day, Tito finally found an opportunity to escape with his backpack. But before he could get far, a squad of monster soldiers from the Sal domain pursued him. In the vast sea, these bloodthirsty monsters quickly discovered Tito by sniffing out his scent. Tito was captured and brought back. This time, he had truly angered the Lord. You want to escape that badly? Have I been too lenient with you, or do you Yinsai people simply not know the meaning of gratitude? Tito didn't speak, but the Lord could hear his inner voice. This place doesn't belong to me. I have my own mission. The Lord's arm, like a spear, swung out, its fluid motion stirring up the water current and Tito's blood. Ah! Tito wanted to cry out in pain, but underwater, the moment he opened his mouth, water kept pouring in. He knelt on the ground in agony, his hands covering his eyes. His world plunged into complete darkness. The seawater stung his wounds, and he struggled in pain, unable to utter a single word. The Lord leaned close to his ear, his voice resounding directly in Tito's mind. Have you seen the bottomless abyss? You like writing poetry, don't you? But the poems you write about us lack soul, vastly different from your Yinsai epic. Without experiencing our terror and suffering, how can you write the perfect poem about us? Tito, come and feel our pain and fear. There, it is this kind of darkness, so dark that not a single shred of light exists. Spreading his arms wide, the Lord declared, Welcome, Tito, to the world abandoned by God. The Lord no longer spared Tito a glance and issued an order to his soldiers, throw him onto the island of the dead. 63. It was the same island, with corpses of trilobite men tied to irregular stone stakes. Their bone armor was broken and decayed, exposing dried-up organs, like bizarre dried jerky. Tito, battered and bruised, was carried to the shore by two Abyss Kingdom soldiers from the Sal domain. Tito lay on the ground, limp and motionless, his body covered in wounds. He kept muttering words that the people of the abyss couldn't hear clearly or understand. It's okay, it's okay. This is all the guidance of fate. I won't die. I will find the God-given land and go to the temple of God to have an audience with the great Yensai. Because everything is predestined. He even began reciting the Red Lucia covenant, as only in this way could he forget the pain of his injuries and the fact that he had lost his eyes. God said, because of loneliness, God created Red Lucia, the king of wisdom. And because of Red Lucia's loneliness, God created the Trilobite men. Thus, the race began, and from this moment, the kingdom was established. God said, the two people of the abyss touched their tentacles together, going through Tito's backpack, trying to find something valuable. The precious sword bestowed by the queen of the Star Luo kingdom had already been taken by the Sal domain lord. The stone tablets engraved with the Yensai epic had also been removed. All that remained were some blank bone tablets and seemingly useless junk. What is this thing? One of the people of the abyss picked up a corroded, pitted cup, holding it up to his eyes for a long time before raising it to his companion, asking, "What a bunch of junk." The companion waved his hand dismissively, knocking the cup to the ground. Clang! The divine cup was discarded on the ground. Tito heard that crisp sound and suddenly seemed to be stimulated by something. It was clearly the sound of the divine cup hitting the ground. Although he couldn't see, he was very familiar with it. Tito lunged towards the sound, disregarding everything, but was firmly held back by the two soldiers. "Give it back to me! Give it back to me!" The monster soldiers pulled Tito up and then tied him to a stone stake. This was the usual method of the Abyss Kingdom when they captured Trilobite men, tying them to stakes and leaving them to die in the scorching sun. "Give it back to me, Tilda." The soldier waved his hand, slamming Tito's head heavily against the stake. Finally, he quieted down. Only after tightly binding Tito did the soldiers leave. As the sky gradually darkened, Tito felt that no one was paying attention to him anymore and began to move. Based on the direction he had heard the sound earlier, Tito knew they hadn't taken the divine cup. Moreover, this divine object lay right at his feet. He moved his bound knees, bending sideways, trying to touch the divine cup. Fumbling in the darkness, he suddenly heard a faint clinking sound. Found it! He was overjoyed. He forcefully pulled his feet back, intending to place it in front of him for prayer. With this divine artifact, he still had hope. Perhaps he could communicate with its will or even use it to plead with God. However, as he pulled back, his feet trembled slightly, and the divine cup, which wasn't securely hooked, suddenly slipped off his toes. It crashed onto the rocks. Clattering and clanging, it slid all the way down towards the sea. Splash! The divine cup fell into the seawater with a splash, the faint sound like a death knell. Tito froze for a moment, and then his body began to tremble violently. He furiously tried to break free from the ropes binding him, wanting to rush down and retrieve the divine cup. Ah, Tilda! He let out an anguished roar, his whole body shaking, but he couldn't break free. Although he couldn't see, he could feel the divine cup drifting away bit by bit with the waves, gradually moving away from him. That feeling was as if he had been abandoned. Only he didn't know if it was fate that had abandoned him. God! He wanted to scream, but his voice grew smaller and smaller until he was just convulsing like hiccups. Hey Tilda! Hey Tilda! Hey Tilda! Ha Tilda! He felt like a ridiculous clown being toyed with by fate, utterly powerless. When true terror and despair descended, he was so fragile. Blood-stained tears flowed from his eyes. Tito had never felt such despair. Even when he left his hometown to travel across the Four Kingdoms, even when he faced all kinds of difficulties and dangers, even when he faced the mockery of thousands. Even when he lost his eyes. He still held his head high. But at this moment, he had lost the divine artifact left to him by Polo, the messenger of God. He had lost his way. And lost the key to entering the realm of God. 3 days tied up on the island of the dead. Tito felt like the blood in his body was about to run dry. The scorching sun beating down on him seemed to evaporate the last bit of moisture and blood from his body. There was no predestined fate. He wasn't some chosen one. He was just an ordinary mortal. In fact, he discovered that he wasn't as resolute as he had told his father when he set out. He had said he wouldn't regret it. But now he regretted it. Ha, Tito, you are too arrogant and conceited. You don't know yourself at all. Who are the ones able to ascend to the temple of God? They are the 2 generations of kings of wisdom, the first king Red Lucia and the great Yesiel. They are Shelley, the mother of life, and Polo, the messenger of God. Those who seek the God-given land, which one of them doesn't possess a noble bloodline and identity? Which one of them isn't a heroic figure who created an era and was recorded in history? Who do you think you are? Something even King Yesiel couldn't accomplish, how could someone like you possibly do it? He asked himself questions and then answered them. Is it really the guidance of fate? Where is the guidance of fate? Tito, you know these are false words used by mortals to justify themselves, yet you speak them so sanctimoniously. People are all deceiving themselves. All of this, isn't it your own choice? Suddenly, he pleaded with God. God, if you can truly hear my plea, please save me. Save me. No one answered him, only death awaited him. On the verge of death, for some reason, another sentence from the Red Lucia covenant suddenly came to his mind. A sentence he had recited countless times but never truly understood. Red Lucia, I am the God who created you. And you are their king. Just as Tito fell completely silent, awaiting his end, an elderly person of the abyss, his body so withered that it had begun to shrink, landed on the island. He wore a stone helmet that concealed his face. In the net pouch at his waist was none other than the divine cup that had fallen into the sea. 64. Who's there? Tito had lost his eyes, and his ears had become exceptionally sharp. A dying old man, the aged person of the abyss replied, his voice resonating from beneath the stone helmet that concealed his weathered face. This old man, wearing a stone helmet, shall henceforth be known as Old Stonehelm. Old Stonehelm took out the decaying cup, which still didn't seem to have anything special about it. Holding up the cup, he asked, these are your belongings, aren't they? Can you tell me why you care about this so much? Does it hold some special meaning to you? Perhaps if I knew, I would let you go. The other party must have observed him for a long time, only approaching at this moment. Tito weakly raised his head. Who are you, really? Old Stonehelm replied, I am a banished old man, a monster with wisdom. The other party possessed the power of wisdom. No matter how foolish Tito was, he wouldn't think the other was an ordinary person. Are you also one of the people of the abyss? Why do you call yourself a monster? Old Stonehelm's words were full of indifference, or perhaps wisdom tempered by the vicissitudes of life. Because when I was born, I was just a monster from the abyss. They are different. When they were born, they were already people of the abyss. Tito gave an ambiguous answer, this is something that gives me a mission and guidance. The other party untied Tito and fed him some water and food. Tito finally caught his breath. After resting in a cool, shaded corner below the island for a night, he gradually recovered. He took back the divine cup from Old Stonehelm's hands. The moment his fingers touched the divine cup, a beam of light illuminated the dark world. The guiding light of the divine cup was still there, even though he couldn't see anything else. Rising to his feet, Tito listened to the sound of the tides and the howling wind echoing through the stone pillars. After losing his sight, he could actually think more clearly about everything. Why he had come here. What he really wanted. In the end, he decided to set out again. He carefully placed the recovered divine cup into his backpack, along with a few broken bone tablets and his carving knife. Old Stonehelm watched him and asked, even in this state, you still want to go find the God-given land? This person of the abyss was very curious about what drove Tito to this point. His persistence, his efforts, his fearlessness, what was the source of it all? Tito immediately became somewhat wary. You know what I'm looking for? Old Stonehelm laughed. I heard everything you said to that little brat. Tito, you know the Lord of the Sal domain. Old Stonehelm, he is my great-grandson. Tito was stunned. Then why were you banished? The other paused for a moment, then said with a laugh. The people of the abyss are different from the Yinsai. We revere strength and despise weakness. We multiply quickly, but food in the sea is limited. Our techniques for raising ancestral fish are far inferior to you Yinsai people. Not to mention, you occupy the most bountiful coastal waters, the most suitable place for ancestral fish to thrive. Aged people of the abyss are useless. When they reach a certain age, they leave their homes and head out to the sea to fend for themselves. Even if they don't want to leave, they will be driven out of their homes. Tito, so you were banished. By your own people, Old Stonehelm. In this cruel world, it's not easy to survive. Old Stonehelm clearly didn't want to continue this topic. He looked at Tito with interest. You still haven't answered me. Why do you insist on finding the God-given land? You've even lost your eyes. Why are you still so obsessed? Tito thought for a moment. Do you understand the meaning of a mission? Old Stonehelm was taken aback. I don't quite understand. Tito laughed, a sound that mocked his former self. Actually, I don't understand either. I used to just say fancy words. But, when you say fancy words often enough, you start to believe them yourself. Proclaiming that everything is fate, everything is God's guidance, and in the end, you truly attribute all mistakes and failures to God. I long to become a greater poet, long for people's cheers. I long for my name to be recorded in history, for everyone in future generations to know me. Old Stone Helm. Then what exactly is a mission? Tito also asked himself, what is a mission? This time, he gave an answer, which was also an answer to himself. A mission is not some supreme glory, nor is it guided by God. It's that I want to do this, that I feel I should do this. Before, I didn't understand. I firmly believed that everything in this world was predestined. But when I lost everything, I suddenly understood. I finally understood why God said those words to Redlichia. Old Stone Helm listened with great interest. He seemed extremely fascinated by this kind of thing because he was also lost, searching for answers just like Tito. What were those words? Tito faced the sea and put his backpack on again. God said to King Redlichia, I am the God who created you, and you are their king. God created all things in life, but uniquely gave the trilobite men wisdom, because wisdom is the power to break free from fate, and wisdom is the miracle that creates everything. From that moment on, God relinquished his control over the fate of the trilobite men. From that time on, God let go. He told King Redlichia that history would be created by the trilobite men themselves. A smile appeared on Tito's face, or perhaps it was a sense of relief. But we couldn't let go. We couldn't bear God's letting go. We didn't believe we could create history. Because we are truly insignificant. But God believes that we, insignificant as we are, can create miracles. Tito stepped into the sea, the water engulfing his footsteps. I no longer yearn for anything. I no longer wait for the arrangement of fate or the guidance of God. Because I am creating history, creating my own history. This is my mission. Listening to Tito's words, Old Stone Helm suddenly felt an inexplicable shock. Without any passionate outpouring or impassioned speech, the plain and direct words struck even deeper into the heart. He felt that the answer he was seeking was right here. He stood up and looked at Tito's retreating figure, calling out in a voice filled with wonder, Tito, do you truly believe that God exists? Tito didn't answer, but Old Stone Helm caught up to him. I'll accompany you too. I also want to see what the realm of God is really like. I also want to know if we were once the firstborn of God. Tito still didn't respond, but Old Stone Helm persisted. The place you're going will pass through the royal capital of the Abyss Kingdom, the former Yesile city. Without my guidance and help, you won't be able to cross through there. Tito turned his head back. Are you sure you want to go to the God-given land? God may not welcome a sinful person stepping into his paradise. Old Stone Helm, that's my problem. Tito dove into the sea, and Old Stone Helm closely followed him into the deeper parts of the ocean. A God-forsaken sinner on the verge of death and a poet who had lost his eyes. These two strange individuals formed a partnership and set out together on a journey to find the God-given land. 65. Floating on the sea at night, Old Stone Helm noticed a light emanating from the water's surface, its ethereal glow scattering across the waves, drawing attention. This light did not appear without reason, it guided the people of the abyss. In the vast ocean, where no reefs or islands should have been, a lighthouse emerged, its tall tower breaking through the water's surface with a light stone embedded at the top. Looking at the lighthouse, Old Stone Helm sighed wistfully, it's back again. Tito, unable to see, followed closely behind Old Stone Helm. What's ahead? Old Stone Helm replied, the royal capital of the Abyss Kingdom, the former Yesile city. Built by Yesile, the second-generation king of wisdom and Redlichia's own child. It is also the most ancient city in this world. A horrific wound crossed Tito's eyes. He leaned forward, as if yearning to see this legendary underwater city with his own eyes. This was his first time reaching this place, or rather, the first trilobite man to arrive here in many years. Can you describe what Yesile city looks like? Old Stone Helm glanced at Tito, sensing the deep longing and aspiration on his face. He smiled and looked in the direction Tito was leaning, as if the two were admiring this beautiful wonder together. Legend has it that it was built by Yesile's companion, the Rue Beast Nini. The city can accommodate tens of thousands of residents. Inside, there is the palace where Yesile once lived, grand and majestic. The stone slabs paving the ground were excavated from the edge of the abyss, black and glossy. There is the towering Yesile Tower, rising above the sea, truly an unimaginable miracle. One of the stone tablets inscribed with King Redlichia's writings, brought from the God-given land, is still enshrined in the Yinsai temple within the city. Just hearing this made Tito's blood boil with excitement. Ah, how magnificent, how grand these ruins are. They bear witness to the glory of the ancient king and record the splendor of the God-given era. At this point, a sense of loss and regret gradually appeared on Tito's face. What a pity, it's right in front of me, yet I cannot see it. After a moment of silence, Tito suddenly turned to Old Stonehelm. With so many people of the abyss here, why not go around? Old Stonehelm answered, because the place you must pass through is the deep sea abyss. Only by crossing that dark, lifeless bottomless chasm can you reach the temple of the gods. This is the necessary and shortest route. Tito asked again, how do you know all this? Do you know where the God-given land is? Old Stonehelm shook his head. I don't know, but I do know that people have searched for it before. Many have crossed that abyss to seek the legendary God-given land. Unfortunately, nothing exists there. Old Stonehelm looked at Tito earnestly. I hope this time, you can find that place. Tito asked, you believe I can find it? Old Stonehelm replied, my feeling tells me you will. Tito pondered, you also believe in fate? Old Stonehelm smiled, no, this is an old man's intuition. Old Stonehelm led Tito underwater to a place piled with large fragments of broken stone, among which were some frightening remains. This is where the waste stone from the construction of Yesile City was discarded. Patrolling soldiers don't usually come here. At dawn, there will be a gap in the patrols. That's our chance to pass through. Old Stonehelm lay down on an irregular rock, curling up skillfully. For now, let's rest. Here, Tito couldn't sleep. The large broken stone he leaned against was full of pebbles and irregular pits, the gritty feeling as uncomfortable as eating sand in his food. He tossed and turned, suddenly realizing that what he had thought were pits on the stone were actually characters, one after another. He sat up at once. What is this? It seems to have writing on it. Tito turned to Old Stonehelm, who could read his intentions without him needing to speak. It should be a discarded, unfinished stone tablet that was thrown here. Old Stonehelm transmitted the information he knew into Tito's mind. Tito reached out and touched the stone, tracing the patterns one by one. This is King Yesile's name. It records events about him. Tito was overjoyed. This must be a stone tablet that had been abandoned halfway through engraving, documenting the history of King Yesile. As he read the contents of the tablet by touch, he discovered that it was no ordinary story. Or rather, the fact that it could be engraved on a stone tablet meant it couldn't be ordinary. It recorded the scene of King Yesile's first audience with the gods, following his father. It also described the gods bestowing upon King Yesile the title of Priest of God, and the appearance of the Rue Beast. Beside the temple of the gods stood a young girl. She possessed the countenance of the divine race, yet wielded the terrifying power of the King of Beasts. His Highness Yesile humbly entered the temple, following the great King Redlichia. Then, he saw the eternal God. What a great existence that was! The God, who transcended ages and controlled the laws of time, radiated a star-like brilliance. The light engulfed His Highness, and everything in sight turned a dazzling white. God spoke, "What is thy name?" Reading this, Tito trembled with excitement. He looked in Old Stonehelm's direction, gesturing repeatedly with his hands. "This is what I've been looking for, what I've been seeking. I finally found it. This is the lost history of Is Yinsai. I must record it. I must pass it down forever." Tito took out a bone tablet and his carving knife, meticulously engraving all the text from the stone tablet, afraid of missing a single character. Faced with this tablet, he was like the most devout believer. Old Stonehelm did not stop him, only resting quietly beside him. Suddenly, the tranquil seabed became lively. There was movement in the not-too-distant Yesile city. The patrolling Abyss Kingdom soldiers began to move irregularly and gather in the direction of Old Stonehelm and Tito, as if they had discovered something. "Surround this area and search carefully." The people of the Abyss touched tentacles, continuously relaying orders. "Look for any suspicious individuals. I heard he's back. The old king is back to reclaim his throne." A prawn knight, riding a monstrous sea beast, tore through the waves. Dozens or hundreds of Abyss Kingdom soldiers followed behind him as he transmitted orders and signals using the power of wisdom. "The bloodline stone is glowing. The king says the previous king has returned. We must find him. He cannot be allowed to set foot in the royal capital." The psychic ripples carrying these messages also reached the minds of Tito and Old Stonehelm, who were hiding. 66. In the chaotic stone forest of piled boulders, Tito carefully packed the copied bone tablets into his backpack and suddenly turned to Old Stonehelm. He had heard the words of the Abyss Kingdom's prawn knight, and only he and Old Stonehelm had entered this place. Are they talking about you? Without waiting for Old Stonehelm's answer, Tito affirmed, you are the previous king of the Abyss Kingdom. Tito had been speculating about Old Stonehelm's identity all along. Now, he recalled what the other had said before, including the phrase, finally back, which further confirmed his identity. You also mentioned that you are the great-grandfather of the Lord of the Sal domain. If that's the case, you're not just their king but also the founding king who established this kingdom. Old Stonehelm neither admitted nor denied it. Tito stood up, truly realizing the identity of the aged person of the abyss before him. He felt incredibly shocked. He never thought this person was actually a king, the founding king of a dynasty. Yet, in a cruel twist of fate, he had not only been banished by his own people but also driven from the throne by his own children and former subjects. The reason for his exile was not due to food shortages or the inability to sustain a large population. It was because he had grown old, yet still sat upon the throne. Old Stonehelm's expression was somewhat nonchalant. Even Redlichia, who once started everything, ultimately met a tragic end in his later years. The indomitable King Yesiel also perished miserably in the deep-sea abyss. Prosperity has faded, leaving only ashes behind. Compared to them, what do my bit of glory and pain amount to? Tito couldn't see Old Stonehelm's expression, but he could hear the vicissitudes in his words. He, too, once had a legendary story and sat upon the throne. Tito couldn't help but wonder. When Old Stonehelm stood on the high platform of Yesiel City, declaring to all the people of the Abyss that they were no longer monsters and would establish a kingdom, did he ever imagine that he would fall into such a plight in his old age? More and more Abyss Kingdom soldiers gathered, searching for their traces among the underwater vegetation and broken stones. Old Stonehelm dragged Tito, accurately seizing the opportunity to evade these people's search and circle around in another direction. Tito asked Old Stonehelm, knowing the danger here, why did you still come? Old Stonehelm looked at Tito. Knowing that seeking the God-given land will lead to death, why do you still search for it? The old man turned his head and continued walking. You are searching for the God-given land, while I am searching for an answer. We are both willing to pay the price for it. Tito was stunned, then a hint of a smile appeared on his face. He finally felt that Old Stonehelm was truly a kindred spirit. The two managed to evade the encirclement of the search party. It was evident that Old Stonehelm was extremely familiar with this area, knowing precisely how the patrolling soldiers would move and how to avoid them. Due to the sudden chaos, these patrolling soldiers were constantly being gathered to that area of rubble, making it easier for them to pass through the waters of Yesiel City. Tito speculated whether this was also part of Old Stonehelm's calculations. After all, he was once a king. They hugged the base of Yesiel City and the seabed, circling past the soldiers above, staying just in the blind spot below everyone's line of sight. However, just as they were about to leave the controlled territory of the Abyss Kingdom, hundreds of people of the Abyss suddenly arrived from the higher waters, surrounding the blind poet and Old Stonehelm. The other party seemed to have anticipated their arrival and was waiting here. Father, a voice called out. You've returned. A tall person of the Abyss wearing a black crown stepped forward, his figure imposing and powerful, a strong aura coming off him in waves. Old Stonehelm looked at him and sighed. Let us pass. I did not return to reclaim the throne. I, also do not wish to go to war with you. However, the king of the Abyss Kingdom shook his head. Father, you know the rules. You were the one who set them. You told me that this world is cruel. As king, for the sake of the kingdom and the survival of all, one can sacrifice anyone. You told me that the people of the Abyss need a strong and enterprising king to lead everyone into the future. He continued, you also said, only one person can sit on the throne, and there can only be one king in the royal city. And now, you have stepped into the king's domain. Old Stonehelm fell silent for a long time before speaking. Rules are set by people, he said. And people can change. Old Stonehelm laughed. Perhaps the rules I set back then were wrong. However, the young king would not buy it. He only believed in the truth he had heard in his youth. He only believed in the words spoken by the powerful king, not the words of a decrepit old man. Then let what's wrong become right. A king does not make mistakes. All the Abyss Kingdom soldiers made way, surrounding the two but with no one stepping forward. These soldiers only prevented the old king from entering the city. However, since he had already set foot within the royal city's domain, they had to follow the rules of the Abyss Kingdom. The new king and the old king must wage the war between kings. The victor becomes the king, the loser is expelled. One old and one young engaged in battle, just as they had once fought for the throne. Neither of their powers of wisdom had evolved through the pollen of the Sun Cup flower, so they were not of much use in actual combat. In the end, they still relied on the powerful physique of the people of the Abyss and the wisdom of battle. Everyone expected that since the young king had defeated the old king before, he would undoubtedly do so again this time. However, beyond everyone's imagination, the young king was at a disadvantage from the very beginning. The young king was stronger and more powerful, but Old Stonehelm's combat skills were more refined. He was familiar with the young king's every move and technique, easily evading and countering. In a matter of moments, Old Stonehelm knocked the young king to the ground with a single blow, the impact even shaking the crown loose from his head. He swung his arm like a spear, piercing into the gaps of the young king's armor, but suddenly stopped. With a slight exertion of force, he could have killed this rebellious son and reclaimed his throne. Yet, he withdrew his hand. Only then did the young king realize that when he had challenged his father for the throne, his father had let him ascend. Why? The young king didn't understand. Why would his father do this? Why not kill a son who defied him, a treacherous minister who dared to challenge the authority of the king? Old Stonehelm looked at his son. We are not a group of monsters, child. We, too, were once human. We also once had the love of God and King Redlichia, residing beneath the temple of the gods. As humans, we naturally cannot live like monsters. The son looked utterly confused. I don't understand what you're saying. Old Stonehelm replied, someday, you will. With that, Old Stonehelm turned and left. He gave up the chance to reclaim the throne because it held no meaning for him. Old Stonehelm and the blind poet left Yesile City, heading towards that bottomless deep-sea abyss. 67. Two figures swam through the ocean, passing through the deep-sea abyss, a cursed land that made all Trilobite men tremble in fear. Even the people of the abyss were unwilling to approach this place, afraid of being banished once more by God into that eternal realm of darkness. Below, one could see a bottomless trench extending to the deepest part of the seabed. The dark world seemed like a devouring mouth, and passing over it felt like escaping from between the teeth and lips of the most terrifying monster in the world. Tito surfaced and used the power of the divine cup to survey his surroundings. Although his eyes couldn't see, the light leading to the God-given land still guided his direction. It's over there, he said, pointing. We have to go that way. Old Stonehelm caught up from behind, much slower than before, appearing rather sluggish. Tito even heard his irregular panting, which made him sound incredibly weak. The poet sensed something was wrong. You're injured. Old Stonehelm's chest armor had several cracks, indicating he had indeed suffered some injuries, though the severity was unclear from the outside. The old man himself didn't seem too concerned. I'm getting old, not like I used to be. Even a few collisions are hard to bear now. This body has become as fragile as sand and stone. The shells of the people of the abyss would gradually weaken with age, the opposite of Trilobite men. The bone armor of Trilobite men would become harder with age, gradually becoming like stone. Tito asked with concern, is it serious? He had never thought he would care so much about the safety of one of the people of the abyss, let alone become friends with a king of the Abyss Kingdom. Old Stonehelm stopped to catch his breath. Not too serious. Let's hurry on our way. They dove back into the water, passing through the azure ocean and the abyss. A few days later, the two followed the guidance of the divine cup and traveled all the way, no longer seeing any landmarks in the vast sea. No islands, no Yinsei settlements, and no ruins. They didn't know where they were or how far they had come from the deep-sea abyss. They could only be certain they were heading in the right direction, but as for where exactly the God-given land was, how long it would take to reach it, or whether they could reach it at all, both were clueless. Old Stonehelm had become too weak to continue. His injuries were much more serious than he had let on. As he swam, he began to sink towards the bottom of the sea. Tito suddenly grabbed Old Stonehelm and lifted him onto his back. I'll carry you, Tito said. Old Stonehelm was silent for a moment, then uttered two words. Thank you. The two continued forward, supporting each other. Tito was Old Stonehelm's walking stick, while Old Stonehelm was Tito's eyes. Dusk descended, and the two slowly swam through the golden sea. The lingering rays of the sun penetrated the sea surface, casting into the water, bringing warmth and hope to both of them. Suddenly, a shadow appeared on the golden horizon. At first, the two didn't notice. As they drew closer, the shadow kept growing larger. Old Stonehelm finally saw clearly what it was. An island. Old Stonehelm grabbed Tito, his pupils dilating in an instant. What an island it was, radiating a dazzling brilliance under the sun's embrace. From afar, it looked as if it were made of pure gold. Sacred, holy, and possessing the eternity of gold. It appeared, Tito asked in disbelief. It really appeared, Old Stonehelm exclaimed. Tito was stunned for a moment, then immediately realized what had happened. Really? Is it really? Just ahead. The poet's voice trembled. From the Sky Temple, he had come so far, encountering countless difficulties. Was this finally the end of the journey? Old Stonehelm was even more excited than the poet. He gazed at the island, speaking incessantly. The God-given land, it really exists. His voice filled with awe. He whispered, so God truly exists. The two quickened their pace, heading towards the God-given land. The water grew shallower, and they gradually emerged from the sea, stepping onto God's domain. Tito couldn't wait to ask, quickly, tell me. What exactly does the God-given land look like? Is it as beautiful as the legends say? Old Stonehelm lifted his head from Tito's shoulder, finally seeing clearly what the golden color was. It was a boundless sea of flowers. He had never seen such a magnificent sight. Suddenly, he felt strength surging within his body. He broke away from the poet and moved forward. The flower sea swayed, parting to make way. They were welcoming the arrival of the poet and the old man. The sea of sun-cup flowers, just as you said. There's an endless sea of flowers here, Old Stonehelm said, his voice filled with wonder. Tito responded excitedly, the records in the Sky Temple were true. High Priest Shlode had indeed seen the God-given land before. Old Stonehelm raised his head. Following the boundless flower sea towards the center, he finally saw the pyramid temple amidst the flowers. A giant dream bubble enveloped the magnificent pyramid, with countless iridescent streams flowing over it. He used his power of wisdom to project his voice, shouting with all his might. It seemed he was telling Tito everything he saw, but it was more like an outpouring of his inner excitement. The temple, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. The pyramid, and the temple of the Yinsai god. God is still here. The divine still stands here. Tito also groped his way forward. He smelled a fragrance. A powerful force emanated from his consciousness, probing his surroundings. He sensed the scene around him. Sensed, not saw. The ground, the flower sea, the stone tablets, the ruins. It was as if the images were directly projected into his mind, appearing in his brain. The God-given land, Tito whispered reverently. I see it. It's so beautiful. Old Stonehelm turned to look at Tito and noticed the change in him. The blood of King Redlichia is boiling within you. Congratulations, poet, you have awakened your power of wisdom. The two walked along the path opened by the flower sea. They saw the god-descended city and the stone tablet standing before it. The poet eagerly stepped forward. His psychic power swept over the tablet, immediately seeing what was carved on it. Look, he said, his voice filled with excitement. This is the stone tablet erected by your ancestors, His Highness Ence and His Highness Boone, the children of King Redlichia. It also records their story, the story of how they built Ence City and Boone City. Old Stonehelm approached the stone tablet, personally touching the patterns on it. He knelt down, holding his arms in front of him, paying homage to his ancestors. After Tito finished reading, he walked past the stone tablet. He wanted to enter the god-descended city, to have an audience with the great Yinsai. However, Old Stonehelm stopped in his tracks. He prostrated himself before the stone tablet, not rising again, unable to move forward. Or rather, he didn't dare to proceed. Tito turned his head and called out to Old Stonehelm. Aren't you going up? Didn't you come here to find an answer? Old Stonehelm raised his body, gazing at Tito. A smile suddenly bloomed on his face. Tito had never imagined that a smile from one of the people of the abyss could be so peaceful and blessed. No need, Old Stonehelm said softly. I have found my answer. After saying these words, Old Stonehelm remained motionless. Hey, Tito called out. Hey, Tito called out to the old man. But received no response. The nameless king had died. The wind stirred up waves in the flower sea. The sun-cup flowers that had parted to make way closed back in, one by one, submerging him until he was no longer visible. The poet stood there, dazed. Until the moment of his death, the poet still didn't know Old Stonehelm's name, nor did he know what answer he had been seeking. 68. Tito looked at his friend, submerged in the sea of flowers, unable to put his feelings into words. There was both sorrow and regret, but at the same time, he felt happy for Old Stonehelm. To find the answer one seeks in the final moments of life, Tito mused. That's also a kind of fortune, isn't it? Only when the lingering light of the sun faded beyond the horizon did he turn and set off towards the temple. Old Stonehelm had found the answer he wanted, but Tito had yet to complete his own mission. Darkness gradually descended as he walked along the broken stone path. La 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 la. La 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 la. The sweet, melodious sound of singing carried from afar, as clear as the chiming of wind bells. One after another, spirits clad in luxurious golden robes came gliding over the flower sea with the wind, descending beside Tito. They carried lanterns, illuminating the path ahead for Tito. Who are you? Tito asked these beautiful creatures. As soon as the poet saw their appearance, so similar to Polo, the messenger of God, he understood their origins. We are dream spirits, guardians of the divine flower garden, they replied. God sent us to greet you. Welcome, traveler from afar, Tito the poet of the Yinsai. The spirits had never seen anyone from the outside world before. Curious, they surrounded the poet, dancing and spinning around him. Tito was astonished. Even God knows of me. The dream spirits giggled. God knows all. Accompanied and guided by the dream spirits, Tito passed through the ruined city in the flower sea and arrived at the base of the pyramid. He saw the statue of Redlichia, personally crafted by His Highness Yesiel, the second-generation King of Wisdom. This great King of Wisdom stood beneath the divine pyramid, forever guarding the passage to the Temple of the Gods. As Tito gazed at the statue, his expression one of awe, he ascended the steps one by one. A giant dream bubble enveloped the entire pyramid. As he passed through the bubble, he felt as if he had entered another world. Shifting his gaze from the statue, he found himself already in the realm of dreams. Countless iridescent lights swirled upon the bubble, reflecting one beautiful dream after another. There was snow, there were waves of wheat, there was a summer night forest, and there was soaring above the sea of clouds. All were magnificent dreams the poet had never experienced before, dreams that did not belong to mortals. He looked up towards the top of the pyramid. On either side of the steps stood one trilobite man statue after another, holding up flames to illuminate the path to the sacred. Step by step, he walked the pilgrimage path. The path once trodden by King Redlichia and King Yesiel. Now, he walked it anew. At last, he stood before the temple. The pillars were carved with patterns he could not understand, seeming like fantastical scenes from another divine world. The tall metal doors of the temple reflected a golden light, the entire palace flowing with a noble, dark golden hue, bearing an ancient, time-worn aura. Holding the divine cup, he prostrated himself and entered the temple, crawling on his knees. Only when he reached the center of the temple did he slowly raise his head to look around. Upon the altar sat Shelley, the mother of life, the legendary king of beasts with a divine countenance, who controlled the mother conch of all things. As soon as he saw her, his body involuntarily trembled. Even though she looked like a harmless girl, the terrifying aura that surpassed all beasts was already deeply imprinted in the blood of every trilobite man. To the right of the altar was an incomparably beautiful dream spirit. This lovely being lay on a magnificent white couch, holding a dream egg as a pillow, wandering in the ocean of dreams. He saw the power of dreams, with all sorts of things being born from within. It was as if she had inherited the gods' power to create all things. He also saw a stone statue kneeling beside the altar. It was Redlichia, their ancestor, the origin of all wisdom. Just as in the oral traditions, Redlichia ultimately died before the gods, forever accompanying the Yinsai god in the temple. Finally, he saw the power of the eternal stars projected down from above the altar. The overflowing radiance alone made one feel the might of time, as if even the passage of the ages would halt at the will of the divine. He dared not look any further. He feared that the moment he directly gazed upon the divine, he would completely collapse. Great Yinsai God, please accept the faith of this humble Yinsai subject. Your messenger Polo returned to eternal rest amidst the shattering of dreams on the shore of the god-descended city. Following the guidance of the divine messenger, I embarked on the path back to the God-given land. At last, he declared, now, I have finally arrived before you. God raised a hand, and the divine cup that Tito held high floated up to the altar, gently grasped in the hand of the divine. God took back the divine cup, yet seemed not to pay it much heed. Instead, God looked at Tito the poet and spoke. Tito, do you still believe in fate? Tito was instantly stunned. It was as if this question had pierced straight through his heart. This single question seemed to tear him apart completely. God's gaze seemed to see through his everything. He thought for a moment, then bowed his head to the ground. I believe, he said, because fate is in our own hands. Therefore, I no longer wait for fate to descend, but instead strive to create my own destiny. God smiled, but it was a smile that made Tito feel incomparably at ease. It was the approval of the supreme Yinsai towards him. When Tito left the temple of the gods, God held the divine cup. After a long while, God let out a sigh. Polo. The gods allowed Tito to stay briefly in the God-given land. He took this opportunity to complete his epic. At the foot of the temple, in that God-descended city filled with sun-cup flowers, he carefully searched for traces left behind by history. On the stone tablets, he found ancient stories of old. In the ruins, he found more proof of legendary events. At that primordial ancestral fish swamp, he saw how the divine blessings of yesteryear had truly allowed the trilobite men to create a future. He stood before a collapsed palace. This is the former Wisdom Palace, the royal palace that collapsed because Ents committed the crime of patricide. A few dream spirits accompanied him, guiding his way while also seeking interesting playmates. Yes. In this collapsed palace, he carefully explored and actually found fragments of the Red Lucia Covenant stone tablets. The poet was so excited that he danced with joy, like a child who had obtained the world's most precious treasure. The Covenant tablets, he whispered reverently. The dream spirits thought the poet had gone mad, gathering together to whisper. It's just a broken rock. He's treating it like a treasure. He's gone mad. He must be crazy. In the eyes of the innocent, ignorant dream spirits, these things were just some broken rocks. They did not understand the history and lost glory of the trilobite men. They would not understand the feelings of Tito and all trilobite men who wanted to find these things again. Tito knelt before the Wisdom Palace, tightly embracing the broken Covenant tablets. Tears fell from his blind eyes. Tears of being moved, and of regret. 69. In the days that followed, the poet began writing his epic in a well-preserved room where the guards once lived in the Wisdom Palace. Tito used the stone door as a table and brought the broken column segments into the room to serve as stools. Outside the window, the sea of sun-cup flowers in the night swayed gently, with the sky and ocean at the end of the flower field. When the night breeze blew, the scent of flowers made him involuntarily look outside. He stood by the window, leaning forward with his hands on the sill, letting the flower-scented wind caress his face. I never thought I would truly be in the God-given land, he mused. I really walked the pilgrimage steps trodden by King Red Lucia and King Yesiel and saw the Yinsai God. It's like a dream. He rummaged through his backpack and found he was running out of bone tablets. He erased some unimportant content with his carving knife and engraved new words. Sitting by the window, he began to recall and ponder the experiences from his journey. He thought of the Yinsai Kingdom ruins he passed at the start of his journey, the underwater villages and towns he explored along the way. Those past glories all became the emotions and strength for writing his great epic. The trials in the Sal domain were like a baptism, making him understand the meaning of his life. The inscriptions on the stone tablet he saw in Yesiel City became the cornerstone for writing his epic. And the shock and excitement of finally arriving at the God-given land, where everything made him feel like he was floating in a dream. He burst with incredible passion. The poet felt a myriad of emotions in his chest waiting to be expressed. Day after day, one night, under the starry sky, he engraved the final chapter on a bone tablet. Open double angle bracket Hymn of the King of Wisdom close double angle bracket open double angle bracket final chapter close double angle bracket. Open black lens bracket The first generation King of Wisdom ended his brilliant and glorious life before God due to the betrayal of his son and the death of his queen, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket He passed the throne to his most outstanding son, Yesiel, along with his oath and covenant with God, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket But the gods were enraged by Red Lucia's death and disappointed by the trilobite men's crime of patricide and fratricide, close black lens bracket. With each stroke of his knife, he recorded everything that had happened in his epic. And also on the Yinsai historical stone pillar. Open black lens bracket God withdrew his promised land, and all trilobite men were driven out of the God-given land, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket The gods erased the location and memory of the God-given land from their minds, making it impossible for them ever to return to that God-given paradise, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Even if they reached the outskirts of the God-given land, they could only eternally wander the sea, unable to set foot on this island of the gods. Close black lens bracket. Tito thought for a moment and added a final sentence. Open black lens bracket. The gods withdrew their blessings but also released the trilobite men from their fate. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The end of the God-given era symbolized the beginning of the history of civilization. Close black lens bracket. Tito put down his carving knife. He had finally completed his epic, reclaiming the lost memories and glory of the trilobite men, which would henceforth become the poem and glory eternally sung by all trilobite men. Everyone would know the stories that had once happened, know where they came from and why they existed. This was the power of words, the immortal charm of the written language created by King Redlichia. I did it, he said. I did it. He repeated this phrase over and over, like a mantra from a dream. He pushed through the sun-cup flowers, wandering through the ruins of the God-given land, finally coming to a stop. He realized he had arrived at the base of the pyramid. He bowed to the pyramid temple. At the same time, he prepared to leave. One morning, the poet Tito set out with his backpack. The backpack contained not only the original manuscript of the open double-angle bracket hymn of the King of Wisdom close double-angle bracket he had written, but also 2 sets of stone tablet versions he had replicated. And the precious Redlichia Covenant stone tablet fragment he had found in the collapsed Wisdom Palace. Although it was only a fragment, to the Yinsai people, it was the supreme treasure. Several young dream spirits floated over from the Flower Sea, accompanying the second-tier dream spirit Hela. Tito recognized this beautiful being. She was the one who wandered the realm of dreams at the right hand of the gods. The vast dream bubble in the entire divine temple extended from her body. Tito pays his respects to the great divine messenger, he said. In his view, all dream spirits were messengers of the gods, but it was clear that the dream spirit standing before him now was different. She was powerful and beautiful. She possessed the miraculous power bestowed by the gods, beyond his imagination. Hela studied Tito carefully, then asked him, "Your soul is very pure. Even purer than the souls of dream spirits. Why is that?" The dream spirit was very curious. She was different from Polo, like 2 sides of stillness and motion, but they both had a pair of innocent eyes. She had heard the stories of the trilobite men and didn't understand how these beings, born with strong desires, greed, and bloodlust, could possess a soul comparable to that of the dream spirits. Tito said to her, "Because the human soul can change. It can be tarnished by sin and transformed through trials." The dream spirit nodded thoughtfully. She waved her hand, and a glowing object appeared on the sea surface. It was a gift from the dream spirit Hela to Tito, a sailboat made of metal, its tall white sail billowing in the wind. Tito had never seen such a thing. "What is this?" he asked. She told Tito, "This is called a sailboat, a type of boat. It can harness the power of the wind to sail on the sea. This way, you can cross the ocean and easily return to the shore of your homeland, the place of your origins." Listening to the dream spirit's explanation, Tito immediately understood the significance of this object. Although trilobite men could swim familiar routes in the ocean, crossing the sea required immense physical exertion. They had to stop after each leg of the journey. A sailboat could save his energy and time. Just as people could walk but still needed vehicles. "Thank you for the divine messenger's gift," Tito said. The dream spirit taught him how to control the sailboat, and then Tito sailed away. The single man and boat, with the tall white sail, gradually disappeared on the horizon far from the God-given land. The dream spirit Hela brought the epic stone tablet the poet had given her and returned to the temple. She approached God and said softly, "God, he has left." The dream spirit knelt before God, holding up a stone tablet. On it was engraved the open double-angle bracket hymn of the King of Wisdom close double-angle bracket. The dream spirit Hela asked God, "God, is this truly how the story unfolded?" God did not respond directly but said, "The same stone, viewed by different people from different angles, appears different. Some think it's round, some think it's square, and others think it's triangular." After a pause, God continued, "This is simply the epic of the trilobite men." 70. The poet sailed swiftly on the sea's surface, feeling as if he were racing with the waves, surging with the swells. As he touched the sailboat, he learned about metal for the first time from the dream spirit. Hard, smooth, resilient. The poet had seen a kind of stone on his journey that emitted a similar luster, but he didn't know if there was any connection between the two. He touched the white sail, a creation of silk-like white softness that the poet could scarcely imagine. They could be used to make many other things. In a flash of thought, the poet came up with several uses for them. If the Yinsai also had these things, could they usher in a new era? At this thought, the poet let out a sigh. I'm afraid only the power of the gods can create such divine objects. The dream spirits truly possess dreamlike powers. A journey that originally required many days was completed by the poet in just 2. When he once again passed through the deep sea abyss and reached the waters of ancient Yesile city, he encountered the people of the abyss again, the soldiers patrolling the area. This time, Tito didn't hide. Instead, he actively stepped forward. He wanted to see the king of the abyss kingdom again. He had some words he wanted to say to him. A group of armed people of the abyss charged out from the seabed, circling Tito's sailboat. Leading them was a prawn knight. They looked at the sailboat with suspicion and uncertainty, not knowing what this thing that could sail on the sea's surface was. At the same time, the prawn knight also recognized Tito. This blind poet who had accompanied the previous king of the abyss kingdom through Yesile city. Tito said to the prawn knight, I want to see your king. He, too, had gained the power of wisdom and could directly communicate with these people of the abyss through his mind. Because of Tito's relationship with the old king, the prawn knight didn't dare obstruct him and immediately relayed the message to the royal capital. The poet stood at the bow of the sailboat, waiting. Before long, more and more people of the abyss emerged from the seabed. A force that could be called an army surrounded him and the sailboat. Finally, the king of the abyss kingdom, wearing a crown, appeared before him. It's you, the blind Yinsai man. Where is he? The king of the abyss kingdom asked the poet while looking inside the sailboat, searching for the shadow of another person. Tito knew he was asking about Old Stonehelm and said, he went with me to seek the God-given land. We set foot together in God's paradise. He was injured. As soon as we reached the foot of the divine temple, he died there. We were fortunate, though with a tinge of regret. The expression of the king of the abyss kingdom instantly changed, first to shock, then to bewilderment. Finally, a trace of sorrow welled up. He died. He had feared the other's return, but hearing that he had died in this way, he felt an indescribable sadness. It was as if a huge hole had opened in his heart, leaving it empty. The blind poet nodded. Dead. Died in the God-given land, eternally resting before the gods, flower garden. The king of the abyss kingdom asked, did he say anything before he died? The poet replied, he said he had found the answer. The poet sank into memories, once again recalling the peaceful countenance in Old Stonehelm's eyes. He never said what answer he was seeking, but I can roughly understand some of it. He gifted the king of the abyss kingdom a set of the open double-angle bracket hymn of the king of wisdom close double-angle bracket he had engraved, then said to him, you originated from the God-given era, from Ence and Boone, the children of King Redlichia. Just as your father said. You, too, once had the love of God and King Redlichia, residing beneath the temple of the gods. Tito paused for a moment, then said earnestly, you are not monsters, but people. The king of the abyss kingdom held the stone tablet, remaining silent for a long time. After a while, he waved his hand, and all the people of the abyss parted to open a path. Let him leave. Tito raised the sail and steered the boat away. As he passed through the territory of the abyss kingdom again, no one dared to obstruct Tito's small boat. He once more passed by that island of the dead and even saw the brutal lord of the Sal domain from afar. The lord led his soldiers, watching from a distance, not daring to approach or offend. The two gazed at each other from afar. Tito's psychic powers swept over and could see the shocked expression on the face of the lord of the Sal domain. This lord of the abyss kingdom never imagined that the naive and stubborn poet would truly reach the temple of the gods and pay homage to the deity shared by the Yinsai and the people of the abyss. Outside the god-descended city, the people of the fishing village saw a strange object breaking through the waves from afar. The entire village was in a panic, thinking some monster had crawled out from the seabed. Before long, someone rushed into the god-descended city. He's back. He's back. That poet has returned from the God-given land. He even brought back treasures bestowed upon him by the messenger of God. The god-descended city was in an uproar. Countless people emerged from their houses, gathering by the streets. Even the former lord of the city, upon receiving the news, led people out of the god-descended city to the seaside. The poet Tito had just docked his boat on the shore when the residents and nobles of the god-descended city surrounded him in layers, each of them looking at him in disbelief, doubting the reality of his accomplishment of this great feat. The city lord hurried over, excited, coming before the poet and placing a hand on his shoulder. You, he exclaimed, did you truly find it? As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the poet's blinded eyes. The city lord was instantly stunned, his excited words abruptly stopping. Then, a hint of wistfulness entered his voice. It seems you've been through a lot. Tito didn't mind. It was precisely because of those experiences that I reached the Temple of the Gods. It was they who gave me the courage and drive to find the God-given land and complete the open double-angle bracket hymn of the King of Wisdom close double-angle bracket. Tito turned and boarded the sailboat. This is a treasure bestowed upon me by the gods, a precious object that can harness the wild winds and cross the ocean. It was by relying on it that I was able to swiftly pass through the deep-sea abyss and the Abyss Kingdom to return. He took out the Redlichia Covenant stone tablet from the boat and held it high. This is. Others didn't know what it was, but the city lord, born of the royal lineage, guessed what this tablet was upon seeing it. The poet nodded and said to everyone, "A covenant tablet personally engraved by King Redlichia, hidden beneath the Wisdom Palace." With this, no one doubted anymore whether Tito had ever reached the God-given land. Everyone knelt before the covenant tablet as if on a pilgrimage.